Good evening. Good to be together. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to study a little bit of Torah, talk a little bit about prayer with me. I was sharing with a few folks a little bit earlier. This is one of my absolute favorite things to talk about and to teach about. And so I hope you will tolerate my excitement. And before we begin, I just want to make mention, this session is being recorded, and it will be available on our YouTube channel as part of our TIU YouTube page. Also beginning tonight, these sessions, the audio for these classes will be pulled, and they will be posted to our Torah to the People podcast. So if you miss anything or want to go back to anything, you can go check that out. And I just want to add, just so you all are aware that the session is indeed being recorded. You will notice I'm going a little bit more old school this evening. We will not have a slideshow. Those of you who have come to some of these classes know I love a good slideshow. But seeing as our topic for this evening is, I guess, a little bit more old school, I decided paper is perfect. So we're going to begin with our packet here. You should have gotten 2 packets. We'll be getting to the second one a little bit later. I promise this is not a geometry lesson. We'll save that for a little bit later. I know Joe was really worried about it. But let's begin by offering a blessing for the opportunity to stimulate and nourish our minds as well as our souls. With our blessing for the study of Torah at the top of page 1. Please join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who brings holiness into our lives with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah, to which we say, Amen. So the title for this is To Pray as a Jew. And we're going to get into, I'll use a fancy rabbi word, we'll get into the tachlis of Jewish prayer, kind of like the unspoken do's and don'ts, and when you stand, and why are we singing things that aren't in the prayer book, and all of that kind of good stuff. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I wanted to frame it around the question of why pray? Why pray at all? It's a big question. I'm not sure if we'll be able to fully answer it tonight, but I brought a couple of different sources to give us a little bit of a framework about what prayer is, and then we'll dive into how we as Jews, informed by our many centuries of tradition, how we specifically pray and approach prayer. So let's begin with the words of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, Rabbi Dr. Abraham Joshua Heschel. You name a degree, he likely had it, who delivered an address to the U.S. Liturgical Conference in 1969, where he wrote these words, just so that we're all on the same shared terms. The word liturgy is a word I did not know until I went to rabbinical school. Liturgy refers to the text of a prayer book, or what texts you are using to pray. It's also a more expansive term to refer to kind of the practice of prayer as a whole, but that term may come up over the course of our session, so want to make sure that we all understand it. And Rabbi Heschel writes, prayer is not a stratagem for occasional use, a refuge to resort to now and then. It is rather like an established residence for the innermost self. All things have a home. The bird has a nest, the fox has a hole, the bee has a hive. A soul without prayer is a soul without a home. Weary, sobbing, the soul, after roaming through a world festered with aimlessness, falsehoods, and absurdities, seeks a moment in which to gather up its scattered life, in which to divest itself of enforced pretensions and camouflage, in which to simplify complexities, in which to call for help without being a coward. Such a home is prayer. Continuity, permanence, intimacy, authenticity, earnestness are its attributes. For the soul, home is where prayer is. I'm going to pause there, and we're actually going to return to that in a little bit. So that's from one of the great Jewish thinkers and theologians, philosophers of the 20th century. Let's take a look at a little bit more of a contemporary approach that is actually not from as far as I know, the writer Anne Lamott is not Jewish, but in her 2012 book, simply titled Help, Thanks, Wow, presents a really fascinating approach to prayer that I think is a good way for us to think about prayer as well. And as we're going through these things, I want to encourage you to think about, we have some seasoned Jewish prayers in the room tonight. People maybe who have been attending services, whether willingly or unwillingly, for a long time, or those who have studied prayer later as adults and make it their business to be active participants within prayer. So we have a very knowledgeable group in this room. And so as we're going through these things, I want to encourage you to think about certain prayers, certain maybe songs, certain moments throughout a service that might fit some of the categories that we're talking about. So Anne Lamott, and I hope as many people as possible have had the opportunity to pray with and sing with our artists in residence for the past few years, Alana Arian. She teaches this a lot. Quick plug, Alana will be rejoining us here in Memphis the weekend of May 9th. Hope y'all, or May 8th through the 10th. Hope y'all can join for that. But Anne Lamott writes, we're on page 2. I do not know much about God and prayer, but I've come to believe over the past 25 years that there's something to be said about keeping prayer simple. She says that all prayer is one of 3 things: help, or I've also heard it phrased as please, thanks, and wow. Help, thanks, and wow. What is she saying when she says help, thanks, and wow? And are there examples in Jewish prayer that come to mind?
If you're sick, please give me strength.
Please give me strength.
Mishaberach.
Mishaberach, exactly. Mishaberach is an opportunity for us to ask for healing. Healing for our loved ones, healing for our friends, healing for our world. So that's the help. That's the please. Asking God for things. And I think for your average person, that's how they think about prayer. Prayer is, I am praying for something. I am asking for something. But I hope that over the course of the next hour or so, we can expand that notion a little bit. What else?
Mourner's Kaddish.
Mourner's Kaddish. Say more about that.
We're saying thank you.
We're saying thank you. I love that. Saying thank you for the life that our loved ones have left.
And the life they've left.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Even the Motzi.
Motzi. So which of these 3 does Motzi?
Would be the thanks.
Thanks.
For giving us bread.
Yeah. And even I know a lot of our camp kids even add in to the camp version. It's like, we give thanks to God for bread. And sometimes they'll pop in with a thanks, God. Exactly. Anything else that comes to mind?
Would wow, would the Shema be a wow prayer?
Would the Shema be a wow prayer? Definitely. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Freddie.
Well, because it's kind of, when you look in the prayer book and the way the Shema is written, with the 2 pages and decorated, It's not an ordinary prayer.
Right. Absolutely. It's definitely a wow moment.
I think there are some prayers that are both thanks and wow, and I think of something like the Michamoka.
Absolutely.
Like, wow, thanks. You survived, but who is like you? Who could possibly do this?
Right.
Just awe.
Absolutely.
And I also think of Dayenu,
Mm.
you know, thanks, it would have been enough if you'd done this, but
But you did all these other things too.
all these other things happened.
I
Absolutely.
think a wow moment, not necessarily from the prayer book, is the birth of a child and the, and everything that goes into that. That's a wow moment.
Definitely. Definitely. And one of the things to keep in mind with regard to prayer and blessings is identifying those moments and putting, and I think the work of a liturgist, someone who creates prayer, is to give language to moments such as that. Absolutely. All right, I think we got help, thanks, and wow. I know there's more text on the page, but I have a tendency of over texting. So we're gonna put a pin in that for now. So now let's start talking about what it means for us as Jews to pray. So we're on page 3, going back to our friend A.J. Heschel. That feels disrespectful to refer to him like that, but he is our friend and our teacher. And what he writes in The Spirit of Jewish Prayer is that Jewish prayer is guided by 2 opposite principles: order and outburst, regularity and spontaneity, uniformity and individuality, law and freedom. These principles are the 2 poles about which Jewish prayer revolves. Since each of the 2 moves in the opposite direction, equilibrium can be maintained only if both are of equal force. And this is really, I think, the most important way to think about Jewish prayer. It is the creative tension between, and I put in transliteration these 2 words in Hebrew, keva, which means rote, tradition, maybe you could use it, and kavanah. Kavanah means spontaneous, the words of your heart that come to you in that particular moment. Whereas keva is the framework and the structure, and it's the more rigid. Whereas kavanah is the more creative, the more amorphous. And the tension between these 2 is what has led to not only this, for those who are listening on the audio, I am holding up one of our Mishkan Tefillah prayer books, but also all of the other prayer books that that have come into existence over at least 2 millennia of Jewish history. And I think we've all, in some way or another, experienced this. You have the keva, you have the prayers that you got to say each service, and we're going to be talking a little bit about some of those core ones. But then you have the kavanah. You have, a poem that might be brought specific for that service. You have, in moments of silent prayer, those prayers that we say to ourselves in our own hearts, for which we don't necessarily have a given tradition, but they are specific to us. So to give a concrete example of what I'm talking about, I brought a few passages from the Mishnah. For those who are not familiar, the Mishnah is a compendium of oral tradition that was written down. One of the great things about oral tradition is that we know about them because they were eventually written down. It was put together, edited, redacted in 200 CE. And so, in the morning when reciting Shema, one recites 2 blessings beforehand, the first on the radiant lights and the second blessing on the love of Torah. If that's very confusing to you, we'll take a look at it, don't worry, and one thereafter. And in the evening, one recites 2 blessings beforehand and 2 thereafter. So even 1,800 years ago, we are getting a structure, a framework, a keva. This is what you do when you say the Shema. Now, you might ask yourself, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, why are we reciting Shema in the morning? I'm asking that to the group here. No wrong answers.
central prayer in Judaism.
The central prayer in Judaism.
Never,
When you
never bad.
awaken, you're grateful for life.
When you awaken, you're grateful for life. Absolutely. Key part of what you just said too, when you awaken. Does that sound familiar from something we say around the Shema? I'll say it in Hebrew, "Uvshochbacha uvkumecha." When you lie down and when you shall recite these words, when you lie down and when you rise up. And that's where we get the idea that, okay, we need to literally say this in the morning. But it's not just the Shema. You also have these blessings that are created that surround the Shema. And in the morning, you have two blessings beforehand. You have, in Hebrew, Yotzer Or, blessing for creation, the creator of heavenly lights. The second, you have Ahava Rabbah, which is a blessing of love. And then one after, which is the blessing for redemption, Geulah, which is, Audrey mentioned earlier, Micha Mocha. It's the blessing you say after Micha Mocha. We'll take a look at that in just a second. On the other hand, you have Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer comes in and says, one whose prayer is fixed, and the word he uses in Hebrew is kavua. Remember that word keva? Their prayer is not supplication. It's not true prayer if you're just kind of going through the motions. That's more or less what he's saying.
Mhm.
And so there's this tension. So on the one hand, we're supposed to say very, very specific prescribed words at certain times throughout the day, and the entire first, 20 to 30 pages of the Talmud are spent around this conversation about when you are supposed to start saying the Shema during the day. And at the same time, you have this sense of prayer shouldn't just be rote, shouldn't just be saying the same things over and over again without any heart, without any spirit, without any kavanah. Our third, I think, is a fun example of this idea of intention or kavanah. A person should not stand for prayer unless they are in a serious frame of mind. The old pious ones used to wait 1 hour before praying so as to direct their hearts toward God. And that's this idea of intention. That's actually literally what kavanah means. It means it actually comes from the Hebrew word kav, which means a line. And so when they write, so as to direct, literally create a line from their heart towards God. And so we have this creative tension. You have what you have received from people who came before you, not to mention what the Torah says about how we are supposed to be constructing our lives. But then you have the creative additions. And I'm no scientist, but the way I think about the way that the prayer book has been created is kind of like how a pearl is made by an oyster. If anyone in this room knows the science better than me,
Layer upon layer.
layer upon layer, exactly. So you start with a little grain of sand, and then over the course of time, there are layers and layers and layers that get added on top of it. And that's I think, a really good way of understanding what the prayer book is.
Egg does the same thing.
Sorry?
An egg does the same
An
thing.
egg does the same thing. I did not know that. Good to know. And so you start with just the Shema and the Shema and the Ve'ahavta, which are really kind of the same thing. And then over the course of time, you get blessings. And then you add another piece of the service. And before you know it, you have a prayer book the size of our High Holy Day prayer books that are just filled with many different prayers, many of which come actually from different points throughout Jewish history. So any prayer book you have is really an anthology of many generations of Jews adding their voices to it. Any comments or questions before we...
I've got a really crazy question that just popped in my
That's
head.
what we're here
Are
for.
we always praying to God?
Mm.
That just kind
Great
of hit
question.
that just kind of hit my head. I don't know if I even know the answer.
I'm gonna ask you to put a pin in that one,
Okay.
because we're gonna get
Is
that when
is
we
that
get
a
to our,
question?
when we get to our geometry lesson.
Okay. I didn't even know it was a legitimate question.
Great question.
For some people, I think it may not be a legitimate question, in the sense of, yeah, you're praying, of course, it's to God.
I think for Reform Jews, it's a great question.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I would also add that for Jews, and the Jewish approach to prayer is, I think, uniquely situated to be able to answer that question in both ways, which to say yes and to say no, which of course is a very Jewish answer. Right.
Well, I was reading in one of my books, I want to say it's To Be a Jew. The author states that we as Jews, God does not need our prayers.
Mm,
We need our prayers to God.
mm,
You know, God doesn't need to be thanked because he knows what he does, but we need to show gratitude so that way we can find gratitude in everything we do.
sure.
And can't it be that we're thanking the doctor for saving our life? Or the teacher for helping their child to pass a test? I mean, it can come in different ways, and maybe it goes beyond that
Mm,
at some level. But we don't necessarily say God.
definitely. The way you answer Nancy's question all pins on, what do you mean when you're saying God? Like, what is the God that you may or may not be praying to? Yeah, doctor,
Mix things up a little bit.
please.
Heschel, as I understand it, says God needs our prayers, and if he doesn't, prayer is ludicrous.
Say the last part again.
He says, if God needs our prayers, if he didn't need or want our prayers, prayer would be ludicrous.
Mm.
It
Interesting.
would be a monologue, wouldn't it?
Right. Right.
It's just to throw a little monkey wrench into the thing.
Totally.
Well, needing and receiving the same thing. I mean, maybe God receives the prayers, but doesn't need them.
Well, Heschel admits he doesn't know if there's anybody there, or even if anybody's listening. This is usual.
And it could be, because I think for some people it would be very challenging to say that God needs anything, right? If God is all powerful, all knowing, what could God need? And even within the Hebrew Bible, we get different perspectives on
He
this.
needs companionship.
Companionship, yes, and that is very much Heschel's approach. His entire book is God in search of man. Read humanity. Absolutely, yeah. Ellen.
I may be totally wrong. I'm still struggling sometimes with how to pray best and most earnest.
Mm,
I have the feeling that asking stuff for myself is kind of prohibited. That it is okay to ask for this or that person to, I don't know, for all I care, they win the lottery, but I mean, just like that they get healed.
mhm.
For myself, I would just ask for the strength. Am I completely missing the mark here, or what?
No, I think you're sharing something that I think a lot of people struggle with. I would imagine for many people it feels selfish to ask God for things for yourself. And I mean, it's a wider conversation about, so often we are quick to show up for others and to help others, but may struggle at times to do the same for ourselves.
I just read something very interesting. It said, love for others, the help and the love you give to others is not love, they said. It's a cry for help. And I started thinking about that, and they said it's you can see that very specifically in people who, when they were young, were not loved, did not get that attention.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, your struggle to always help others and love others and forgive others, it's all just one big cry for help. And I was thinking, oops,
Yeah.
what am I to do with
That
that?
could also be answering what God, in whatever form, is asking you to do. That's the mitzvah that you do when you help others.
And there's the mitzvah of helping yourself as well.
Yeah, when
If we think about,
when you do well and you help somebody, it makes you feel better too.
think about the,
Yes,
of course,
it
the key
does.
teaching, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," you shall love your neighbor or your fellow as yourself. The premise of that is loving yourself.
Yeah, because
If you don't
otherwise
love yourself, it's hard to love others.
you wouldn't be well off if I loved him like myself.
Right. And you know, we may think of this as being unrelated to the topic at hand. It is very much related to the topic at hand because, and I know Nancy is a big fan of this. If you know what, let's open up our prayer books. Let's open up. So a lot of the materials I have here are for a morning service, just because a morning service is like the fullest expression of the Jewish prayer service. But for this example, let's take a look at Shabbat evening, what the service that I think most of us are most familiar with. So
One or two.
we are on, let's start on page 28. 28. You've probably heard me say that at least 50 times. We turn to page 28 for our call to worship, right? And just as a reference, so on page 3 in our packet, you'll see at the bottom, I did a very, very quick outline of what a Friday evening service looks like. A Jewish service is built from different distinct frameworks. So for a Friday night service, you have Kabbalat Shabbat, which is opening songs and psalms. You have the Shema and its blessings, and it says it right here on page 28 in our prayer book. Shema u'virchotecha, the Shema and its blessings. You have the Amidah, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and then you have concluding prayers. So just to orient you to the prayer book before I get to the point, I don't know if anyone has ever noticed that along the margins, on the right, of course in Hebrew, on the left in transliteration, you actually have the framework of the service that's guiding you where you're going to go. I wish, whenever the next prayer book is being put together, I don't know if any of y'all have any connections. I would love to be on that committee. I wish they had put English translations on the left side rather than the transliteration, because each of these have particular themes and particular ideas that they're centering on. So we have the Baruch Hu, our call to worship. It is, of course, one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight, and we'll get to it in just a moment, is bowing and the choreography of prayer. Of course, Baruch Hu is really the first choreographed prayer, where traditionally speaking, the leader bows for the first line, Baruch Hu et Adonai. The congregation responds with Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed, and then the leader responds with Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. It's kind of a back and forth of bowing and call and response, in the same way that in older versions of the prayer book, you would have specific lines that are indented and in italics, one for the prayer leader, one for the congregation. Anyway, the next blessing we have is our blessing for creation, Ma'ariv Aravim. Following that, on page 32, we have, I mentioned in the morning, we have a blessing that starts with the words Ahava Rabbah, a great love. Ahavtanu, you have loved us with a great love. This one is the evening version, which is Ahavat Olam, endless love you have granted to your house, Israel. And so this is the first slice of bread in the love sandwich, which I know is one of Nancy's favorites. So the blessing immediately preceding the Shema, of the line of the Shema, is Ahavat Olam, everlasting love you have offered your people Israel. What does that love look like in the perspective of our prayer book? Giving us Torah, giving us mitzvot, giving us a way to lead our lives that brings meaning and nourishment, so on and so forth. Then we have the beautifully formatted Shema, as Freddie mentioned, on pages 34 and 35. And then if you remember Ahava, Ahavat Olam, Ahava Rabbah, the next words you say after the Shema, Ve'ahavta, you shall love. And so there's this dynamic, that's the second slice. So in the middle is the Shema, Ahavat Olam on one side, Ve'ahavta on the other side. Love sandwich. Everyone with me? And Ahavat Olam is about God's love for us, and then Ve'ahavta is about our love for God, and also expressed in the love that we give just out into the world. Because this wasn't intended as a theology class. Of course, Joe brought in a little bit of theology, but if we are all created in God's image, then not only is loving ourselves loving God, but also loving other people is loving God as well, because we are all pieces of God. Anyway, so that's the love sandwich. So let's dig a little bit deeper. We're here in the Shema and its blessings. If you look on page 4 of your packet, you will find a wonderful graphic from Larry Hoffman's My People's Prayer Book. Larry Hoffman, longtime professor and scholar at my alma mater, the Hebrew Union College, really one of the great scholars of Jewish liturgy in the past at least 50 years, and just an amazing teacher, amazing scholar. And he lays out what was listed when we were looking at the Mishnah, when it said, in the morning when reciting Shema, one recites 2 blessings beforehand and 1 after, and in the evening, 2 blessings beforehand and 2 after. So this is for the morning. Of course, we have the Baruch Hu, and then you have the 2 blessings before and the 1 blessing after. And you'll see that these blessings are not just any kind of blessing, but what he demonstrates is that it's actually telling a story. There is a narrative to our prayer, even if we may not be cognizant of it. So in the morning, you have Yotzer, the blessing for creation. What would that be at night? What's the analog prayer at night? Trivia question? We're coming to that. We're coming to that. It's before Mariv Aravim. Another blessing for creation, specifically about the evening. Yotzer in the morning is about light. So obviously the sun is up and sunrise and all of that. Okay. Then we have our blessing. It's referred to as Birkat HaTorah. This is our Ahavat Olam in the evening, Ahava Rabbah in the morning. And this is all about revelation. The way that God loves us is by giving us a way of life, by giving us Torah, by giving us, the holidays, all of that different aspects of Jewish life. And so you have an arc that's happening. You have creation, revelation, and then eventually with blessing 3, at the end of Mi Chamocha, you get redemption, which is why we say Ga'al, Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael, blessed are you, the one who redeems Israel. When you think about the way that, and if you're really curious about this, I would encourage you to check out a guy named Franz Rosenzweig, who wrote a book called The Star of Redemption. I gotta tell you, it's not easy reading through that book, but he talks about this a lot. This is actually the arc of the way Jews understand time. You go from the creation of the world to the revelation at Sinai, and we are on our way towards that moment of redemption. The Messianic age is how we would typically refer to it.
Do you have the title again?
Sorry?
Do you have the title again?
The Star of Redemption.
Thank you.
And so just within the Shema, you are getting a small version of this larger narrative, the way that we understand history. Going from the creation of the world to Revelation, the encounter with God, whether it's specifically the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, or if we want to think more expansively, Revelation in terms of encountering God in our daily lives, whatever it may be, all the way to redemption, whatever that may mean. That's a class for another. That's another topic.
That's what I just was gonna say.
That's another topic.
What does that really mean?
What does it? Yes. And so, just within this section, within the Shema, you're getting an arc. You're getting a narrative. And then, if we remember, so in the morning, 2 blessings before, 1 blessing after. In the evening, there's 2 blessings before, 2 blessings after. So what's the blessing that comes right after the blessing for Geulah, Wendy?
Is it the prayer for peace, the Sukkot Shalom?
Yes, Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu. So Hashkivenu is only for the evening. Exactly. And it's always amazing to me that the way that we pray is being described in a book that was written 1,800 years ago. And we still have Mariv Aravim. We still have Ahavat Olam. We still have the Shema. We're not going to dig really deep. You'll see that the Shema comprises of 3 different paragraphs. Not going to go into that for tonight. And we still have Micha Mocha and the blessing for redemption. It is, it's pretty amazing. But in the reality is that we may say, oh, well, in the Reform prayer book, there's it says, Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu, Bahamidenu Shomrenu, but the traditional language is Bahamidenu Malkeinu. The reality is when those words were written in 200 CE, there were key little elements, like you knew you had to end with Haporei Sukkot Shalom or Gal Yisrael or whatever it was. The rest of it was actually spontaneously created by the prayer leader and was dependent upon which community you were in. And so over time, what was once spontaneous and creative becomes fixed. Once again, we see that dynamic of keva, wrote, and kavanah. And this is just, this is true of so many different things. It's similar to, I'm sure folks in this room remember when Debbie Friedman and Jeff Klepper were new, different, creative, whereas I think for many people in my generation, they have become fixed. They have become their own, I'll use the term, orthodox, with a lowercase o. Put it that way.
Part of the tradition.
They're part of the tradition, absolutely. And those creative things typically influence tradition. Before Debbie Friedman wrote Misha Berach, that Misha Berach, it was not common practice for a Misha Berach to be recited on Friday night services. It was because that melody, and because that moment that she was able to help craft and the language she helped to give to what people were feeling, that it is now standard.
And was it also not common practice to give equal weight to the 4 mothers as well as the 4 fathers?
Correct. So once we get to the Amidah, we'll see prayers for the ancestors initially was only listed men. Now it includes the matriarchs as well. Absolutely.
Also in Orthodoxy, modern
In
Orthodoxy.
conservative movement and Reconstructionist, in modern Orthodoxy, no.
Okay.
And, oftentimes the question of, and this is a question that we as rabbis ask ourselves, what is fixed and what is malleable, what can we change, is an ongoing question. And it oftentimes depends on the community. I could not imagine leading a service from the Bima in the chapel and not having some kind of a Misha Berach. Certainly for us here at Temple Israel, part of our keva is Rabbi Danziger's beautiful prayer for healing. That is, I could not imagine doing a service on a Friday evening without that. And so, but at one point that was new and that was different and that was,
And challenging.
I would imagine.
You mean in the sense of, are we allowed to ask for healing? Yes.
And,
Are we allowed to change anything?
right,
And that too, yeah.
right.
But
So,
every time we come out with a new prayer book, there's change.
certainly.
Yeah,
The
but not in
music
orthodox.
changes, some of the prayers change, there's, every once in a while I say, where's the old Union prayer book? I wanna go back to the old prayers that sounded right, but you get used to the change.
Something else becomes to sound right. But there are a couple of the prayers in this prayer book on the left-hand side, the newer, more, sometimes more secular versions, that talk about us bringing new insights into Torah,
Mhm.
being Torah, asking questions, challenging the tradition.
It's funny
Definitely.
how we are so different from the other streaming. I know an Israeli, they're good friends of ours, but he can get so livid when we speak about the mothers, ancestors, and God in a female way. I'm like, how dare you? It's like,
There's a reason why we have different denominations now.
yes.
It's because
Obviously.
these things are very core to people. So I'm just looking at the time. This is really wonderful. There's a few more things I want to get to. The passage at the bottom of page 4, we don't need to read through it. I just want to ask everyone, do you stand or you sit when you recite Shema?
Stand.
Yes.
I know that Ben is a graduate of our Embracing program. So for a long time in Reformed tradition, you stand. If you go to probably most other Orthodox or conservative synagogues, you typically sit for Shema.
Really?
Yes, and there's a debate in the Mishnah about what your posture should be when you are reciting the Shema. Because it says when you lie down and when you rise up. And so, of course, this is a classic Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai, who's typically very to the letter of the law, says, well, you should be reclining when you say the Shema at night. Because it literally says when you lie down. The shift in the Reform movement primarily came, there's many reasons to stand in prayer. One of the main reasons is you stand for the really important stuff. You stand when the ark is opened. You stand, of course, in the high holy days. You stand for a lot of the big petitions.
And when you say Kaddish.
And certainly you stand when you say Kaddish, exactly. And so certainly for us in the Reform movement, the Shema is like this really central prayer in a way that actually in prior periods of Jewish history, it didn't have the same quite elevated status. Not to say it wasn't important, but for the early shapers of the Reform movement who they were really big on the idea of Judaism as ethical monotheism, and the monotheism is the big part of it as a way of bringing them closer maybe to their Christian neighbors. The Shema becomes this really, really important moment, and so now we stand for the Shema. Technically speaking, and according to Jewish law, you're just supposed to stay in whatever posture you already were in. So just wanted to make note of that since we were going to talk about.
If you have time for just one quick story.
Yeah.
Those in the synagogue I've been to before, and they start saying the Shema, half are standing, half are sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And the sitting yells, the one sits, they yell at each other and scream. And he asked the rabbi after, what is it all about? He said, I don't know. So he goes to the old folks' home, and he says, the oldest person there, he says, when you started, were they sitting? He said, oh, no. He said, were they standing? He said, no. He said, what about the yelling and screaming? That's the tradition.
Absolutely.
There's always one word.
I know there are so many questions and so much to cover, but about the Shema.
Yeah.
The practice of whether it's standing or sitting. Some people choose to cover their eyes. And the same thing with women lighting the candles, to bless the candles, covering our eyes. Can you talk to us about those sort of physical practices as well?
Definitely. Definitely. So especially with the Shema, the idea is you want to be as focused and as heartfelt as possible. And I'd have to take a look about how long that practice has been in effect. And so a lot of people will cover their eyes and close their eyes as a way of, like deepening the intention and the focus of it. That's primarily why. You may also see people will make this shape in front of them, which is creating a shin, which is the first letter of commonly used name for God being Shaddai. And so the idea of creating a shin with your hands, similar to actually, I don't know if folks were familiar with this. This is also creating a shin, the Hebrew letter shin. So it's the same as Shalom, but specifically for Shaddai. Exactly. You got it. Exactly. That was going to be my next point. One of the things when you lay tefillin, the various types of wraps that you do, specifically the wrap around your hand, creates the word Shaddai. And so that's typically why people will cover their eyes for the Shema, just as a way of really, really focusing. Similar, if you're in a more traditional space, when you go through the Amidah, in the morning, you may often see people people who are wearing like a really big tallis, and they'll drape it over their heads, similarly as a way of trying to get rid of any distraction and really focusing on it. Now, the covering your eyes for lighting of candles is a little bit different, actually. The way I was taught it is that because technically you're not supposed to light a fire on Shabbat. And even just the practice of lighting candles is an opening for a whole other conversation I'm happy to save for another one. But it's kind of like a cloak and dagger, smoke and mirror thing of like, yes, we know you're not supposed to light a fire on Shabbat, and you light the candles like a little bit before Shabbat comes, but it's kind of this idea of you light the candles, you say the blessings, and then it's like fully Shabbat, and then you open your eyes and it's like, oh, we have fire. Like, who lit that? That's the way I was taught that. So it's kind of a loophole little thing.
And in Europe, when I go there to shul, in all the countries that I've been to so far, they all end the service with the candles. They never start it because they say, now it is Shabbat.
A lot of people do that. There's so if High Holy Days, we actually see this in the prayer book. The High Holy Days, if y'all remember on Rosh Hashanah, we begin by lighting candles and doing Kiddush. Kiddush is on page 78. I think it's 78, which is like at the end of the service. So there are communities where they do that, where you do candles and Kiddush at the end of the service.
And the Sephards that I know do all this. I don't know, I've always done it too.
Oh, I'm trying to remember, in the early mid-60s, I don't remember seeing any of this in my congregation in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't the covering of the eyes, there wasn't the, everything we had just been talking about. And I'm thinking, when did it change? When did it, there was no towels, there were no yarmulkes, it was like, there was a choir, there was an organ, and it was very reformed.
You were on time.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And so the Hebrew word for this is minhag, custom. And those kinds of things, it's amazing to see how things change.
Boy.
We're changing back.
Right. And, and part of it is, how is the culture of prayer shifted? Is it the case where, okay, a bunch of people that are like scholars of religion who are saying, okay, this is the way we're going to do things, but at the end of the day, people like what they like and connect with what they connect with, and at the end of the day, we're here to serve the people. A great example of this is Kol Nidre. Great example of this. Even stretching back a couple of centuries, for a long time, rabbis, scholars, leaders have tried to get rid of Kol Nidre.
You mean the singing of it?
So just it as a part of High Holy Day services.
Wow.
It's kind of
Because,
a crazy prayer.
yes, and it's not even, I didn't want this to be like me dismantling all of your beautiful connections with prayer, but Kol Nidre is not really a prayer, actually. It is a legal formula that you're supposed to do on those major holidays that it does exactly what it says. It releases you from all vows. It basically cleans your slate and exempts you from God potentially holding it against you that you didn't do what you were saying you were going to do. But for that exact reason, if you read it, it does not read like poetry or like a prayer. It reads like a legal formula, which is what it is. And so it also, particularly in the times when Jews were being welcomed out into mainstream society, it was something that people were very nervous about the Christians knowing about, because it opens up for claims of dual loyalty, meaning, oh, you can't trust Jews. Each year during their New Year's, they release themselves from any agreements, commitments, contracts, anything like that. So people were like, how are they going to trust us if we're still doing this as part of High Holy Days? Now, the melody for Kol Nidre is so moving and powerful that when they tried to get rid of it, people revolted. And there were even cases of liturgists writing a different text to use the same melody for it, and still it didn't stick because it had such a powerful resonance for people that you couldn't touch it. It became fixed, but not fixed necessarily because of what it's saying, but because of the emotions and the drama and the awe that come with it. So
Now, is the reform movement becoming more conservative or more, as I'm listening and coming from such a reform movement in Houston, and seeing all these changes, I'm thinking we're becoming a little more religious and more conservative. And is it possible that we will all be one?
Conservative.
I mean,
That's a good one.
No, that's
some people say that we already are. In actuality, there are, and this is actually a thing, there are people that are post-denominational Jews, meaning describe themselves as not abiding by those same labels and those same boundaries. Nancy, I'll get you in a second. Carrie, it seemed like, did you want to add something to that?
No, I'm just fascinated. I'm listening.
Okay. Yeah.
It's funny because that subject came up at noon last week in Rabbi Sammy's class, and we were talking about the conservatives splitting, where half of them are becoming more Reform and the other half are becoming more Orthodox, and that the conservative movement is actually diminishing, and that they're actually, so, because I actually go to both, and so the exact, what you just said, conservatives actually saying the exact opposite of what you just said, which thing, that just kind of fascinated me, that the Reform
Right.
perspective is the exact opposite of what the conservative perspective is.
And a big part of it is, and this is something Larry Hoffman talks a lot about in another book. It's called Beyond the Text. But a lot of it is really, I think we think of those distinctions as primarily ideological and liturgical, meaning it's like, okay, we believe different things and we pray in different ways. So often it's actually cultural and sometimes even socioeconomic about those distinctions, meaning when the Reform movement was created, it was primarily German, French, and British Jews living in societies where they were accepted into society to a certain extent, of course. Whereas what became the conservative movement was created by people who came from Eastern Europe within the Russian Empire, where they were not acculturated in the same way. And so even like the use of Yiddish or the Yiddish pronunciations of things was a marker of kind of where you fit. Do you say Shabbat Shalom or do you say Good Shabbos? Do you say Chag Sameach or just Happy Rosh Hashanah or whatever it is, or do you say Good Yontif? And earlier on in the history of American Judaism, those distinctions were very guarded. You had in many cities 2 different Jewish country clubs, one for the German Jews, one for the Eastern European Jews. When they would marry each other, some people would refer to it as an intermarriage. Nowadays, it's true, my grandparents. Nowadays, it's a lot more mixed. Okay, I really want to get to the axis. Page 5, talked a little bit about the Amidah. On page 6, I just wanted to add something. I talked a little bit about choreography. Believe it or not, our choreography for our prayer service comes all the way from the Babylonian Talmud, specifically for the Amidah, which of course means standing. And the Amidah, for the vast majority of Jewish history, has been the central. Like the rabbis would refer to it as ha-tefillah, meaning the prayer. Just wanted to make a quick note because I think some people, including us as prayer leaders, sometimes get things a little bit mixed up. And it's okay, but the sages teach these are the blessings of the Amidah in which a person bows. In the first blessing, one bows at the beginning and at the end. So at the very beginning, we do Adonai Sifatai Titach Fi Yagid Tehilatecha. Then you go Baruch Atah Adonai. You bow. And at the end, Baruch Atah Adonai Magin Avraham Bezrat Sarah. And then the next time you bow is in the blessing of thanksgiving. This is usually something we do as a reading. It ends. The last words are Hatov Shimcha L'cha Na'eh Lehodot. Comes towards the end. I gave a little map of the Amidah. It's in section C on page 5. Yes, so I just wanted to make note. I do know some people bow for the Gevurot, which is the second blessing of the Amidah. We do, even though it sounds the same, we do not bow for that one. But no one knows everything. It's okay. I just wanted to make that point. Now,
Question.
Yes.
What does it actually mean, the Shmoneh Esrei?
okay.
What?
I was hoping to be done at 8:15. Are people okay if we go a little bit longer?
Yes, please.
Okay. The question,
Yeah.
where does the term Shmoneh Esrei come from? Has anyone else heard that term before? So let's take a look.
Well, I've heard it, I just don't know what it.
We're gonna take it. So, top of page 5. Ellen, would you read for us the teaching from Lawrence Hoffman?
Okay, the Amidah, also known as the Shmoneh Esrei. Everything about the Amidah is intriguing. We do not know for sure when Jews started saying it or even why. Most puzzling of all is how it came to consist of 19 benedictions, since the Amidah is also named Shmoneh Esrei. That is 18, not 19 benedictions. It was the rabbi's favorite prayer, after all, known originally as Ha-tefillah, that is the prayer. Literally thousands of learned Jews have spent their lives reading and rereading those few classical texts that purport to explain how it came about. Lawrence Hoffman.
So that's why it's called the Shmoneh Esrei, because there's 18, but in actuality there are 19.
Yeah, I heard something like there's one that has been added. Which one was that and why?
It's a whole debate about which one was added, or if there was one that was initially one together that was then split apart.
Okay.
There's books written all about
And I
just
still
this.
Kind of like
know,
different strands of
and I still
Judaism.
don't know the linguistic, grammatical buildup of this Shmoneh Esrei.
Shmona means 8. Esrei is Eser means 10, but when you're talking about teens in Hebrew, it's all Esrei. Shmona Esrei, Tesha Esrei.
Okay. Never got that far.
That's okay. That's okay. So it just means 18. And then at the bottom, there's a map of all the different 18s. You'll see that the first 3 and the last 3 stay consistent. The section B, it's actually kind of cool the way depending on which service you're in, it will shift. So for the High Holy Days, the middle part of section B is very different. And even you may be thinking to yourself, hey, I don't remember praying 19 blessings on a Shabbat evening.
Yeah.
And you would be right, because for Shabbat, that entire section B is replaced with one prayer. And so on Shabbat, instead of 19 or 18, we actually get 7. The reason being,
We need to be home on time.
we need to be home on time, yes. And actually, so you'll notice in the middle, those are all the petitionary prayers, asking God for wisdom, for repentance, for forgiveness, for deliverance, for healing, for years, gathering of the exiles, so on and so forth. The way I learned it, the reason why we don't do all of those petitionary prayers on Shabbat is God's got to rest too. To rest, exactly. God's got to rest too.
Yeah, it's a bit ugly too sometimes for punishment of heretics.
That is one of the options for what was added in. That is a whole session all on its own, but I really want to share this with y'all. I did teach about this, I think my first year here. I did a brief little synopsis, but I wanted to bring it. This is something I've been thinking about since rabbinical school, and I call it the axis of prayer. Going back to what Nancy had asked about, okay, what does it mean to pray? Can you pray in a way that's not praying to God per se? What does it mean to pray if you struggle with belief in God? I think that the axis that I have thought about, I think kind of answers it, and it also speaks to Jewish prayer. So I pulled from Google Images this wonderful example of a 3D axis where you have your X, Y, and Z axes. And I think that for most of us, when we think about prayer, if you were to envision in your mind what someone praying looks like, I think many of us would think of someone on their knees, maybe with their hands like this, looking up.
Oh, yeah.
Looking up, right? And I think this is probably the most classical notion of what it means to pray, which is looking up into the heavens, because that's where God is.
Didn't it start out like this?
Sure.
And then, let me see, I was told that the Muslims started doing it. So, no, we don't do it anymore. And then there was sitting on your knees and
Prostrating.
and everything. And then the Muslims did it. Oh, we don't do it anymore.
Yes, it is now on Rosh Hashanah, conservative and Orthodox, and some Reform Jews, I will say, do fully prostrate during one particular moment of service, which is called the Great Aleinu. So when we bend our knees and bow, actually, Rabbi Micah and I have a difference of opinion on when you actually bow, which word, not important.
It says so in the book exactly when to do it.
Not important. And so on Rosh Hashanah specifically, many Jews will actually fully prostrate, lie down on the ground. We don't do that here.
We don't have the room for that. Come on.
Exactly.
We have to stop.
To go back to our axis, I do think that the vertical dimension it's a core part of what it means to pray. I brought this passage from Carl Sagan because when I think of the vertical dimension and the idea of looking out, not necessarily of like, okay, I'm looking up and then like really far away, there's like this big white palace thing and there's this dude with a big white beard who's sitting there in a robe. But I think the idea of looking out into the universe is a really powerful idea as a mode of prayer and thinking about our place in this enormous cosmos and the pale blue dot that we are, and the idea and so thinking about Heschel's term of radical amazement and awe and wonder, I can't think of a more wondrous idea than us being on a spinning blue ball in a solar system surrounded by millions upon millions of galaxies and so on and so forth. And that's what Carl Sagan is talking about, of course, in his very Carl Sagan way. I really do think that a vertical axis encourages us to, on the one hand, be humble and understand how small we are and compared to these grander forces of the world. And also just marvel at, even as small as we are, our ability to know and to see so many things. So that was a quick synopsis of the vertical. Yeah, Joe.
I remember from where it was Heschel said that we pray, instead of trying to find out what's going on up there, we should try to find out what's going on in here.
And so that,
And feel like the concept of self.
absolutely. So that's axis 4.
It's amazing. Well, yeah, whether God leads us or not, that God allows us to do this.
Mm.
Just that idea
Mm-hmm.
that what we consider as God, we are allowed to do this.
Mm.
What puts us?
Yeah. So the inward is actually axis 4. So if you look on the graph, the z-axis, it goes up, but it also goes down. The way I understand it is like, okay, if like my head is the center of the axis and it's going up, then the down is actually going inward. But we'll get to that.
Trigonometry.
There you go. There you go. And I brought a biblical text that we use as part of prayer, and then sometimes in difficult moments that I think speak to this. I think one of the most obvious to come to mind with a vertical orientation towards prayer is a song for ascents. I lift my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. I look up to the mountains. I look up to God. So that's one way of experiencing prayer. Second is horizontal. So many services we begin with these words, Hine matov u'mana'im shevet achim gam yachad, how good and how pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to dwell together. And this is how I think about the horizontal. It's the everyone around you coming together in community. Prayer as a communal, yet also personal practice. Rabbi Heschel writes, it is true that a Jew never worships as an isolated individual, but as part of the community of Israel. Yet it is within the heart of every individual that prayer takes place. It is a personal duty and an intimate act which cannot be delegated to either the cantor or the whole community. We can't pray for you. We pray with all of Israel and every one of us by ourselves. So this dimension of the communal and the personal, I think, speaks to multiple of these axes. And just as it is the case with the help, thank you, and wow approach to prayer, oftentimes when you pray, it can be a combination of all of these things at once or one at a time. It's not just a one fixed thing. It kind of traverses all of these different axes. And I think for myself and for many of us, part of the power of prayer is being in community, being together, connect. And also if we expand kind of the circle, the horizons of the circle of this axis, it's thinking about, okay, I'm here with my community in this particular building. We're connecting with Jewish communities all around the world that are doing similar things or the same things, not necessarily at the same time, but also thinking about the second half of the circle that we talk about in the sanctuary, thinking about Memphis, thinking about Tennessee, thinking about the United States. I think for many of us, when we're praying, we're also thinking about the world around us. And that's the horizontal that I'm thinking.
Rabbi,
Yes.
a bizarre thought, but think about horizontal and wow and community. The universe is effectively flat. It's not everywhere. It's every, universe spreads out effectively flat. As far as with a trillion galaxies, it's anyway. Just connect with that. So.
Absolutely.
That's kind of
You're one of
mind-blowing.
those who thought the earth was flat and it wasn't round?
I think that.
The universe you're saying.
The universe.
The universe
Oh,
is
the
flat.
universe.
The universe.
Oh, okay,
Is, I never heard.
Two tongues. I never mind.
right.
Yes, modern astrophysics actually.
Let me ask you something.
Sure.
How religious was Carl Sagan?
Not particularly.
I mean, when he quotes this, I see him as not against religion, but a non-religious person.
Yeah.
He was a scientist, and everything he ever says, and certainly I can certainly believe it, because there's nothing more beautiful than being somewhere where you can see all the stars and see everything that's going on. But he was not a religious person.
Correct. Correct. And I part of me including that is I think for so long people have lifted religion and science as being opposites. And what I'm hoping to convey, and I think typically these days you don't hear as much about it, unless you're talking about like your Richard Dawkins or your the people that are like really virulently anti-religion, but actually oftentimes some of the greatest scientists were actually very religious people. Because if to build from Heschel, if to be a religious human being is to live in awe at the fact that we are here and the fact that we can observe our reality and communicate and love each other and all those things, science is guided by that aspect of awe, that wow, there's so much I don't know and I want to know. And the more I know, the more I realize how little I know.
I think the last 2 weeks have shown us
Sure.
how science and everything has taken care of everything, and where we were all stuck in our homes, meditating and doing whatever we do.
I'm
But,
glad to know you were meditating.
well, I was meditating about cleaning out a few things.
Yeah.
I
And
got very
actually,
industrious.
at the bottom of page 2, I included some of the English translation of our second blessing of the Amidah, which is the Gevurot, which means like great powers is probably how you might translate it. And it's all about God's power in the world, specifically as translated through nature. You are forever mighty, Adonai, you give life to all, you cause the wind to shift and the rain to fall, you sustain life through love, supporting the fallen, healing the sick, freeing the captive, who is like you, source of mighty acts. And so that could be seen as like the horizontal, it could be seen as the vertical. It's kind of working together there. But the idea that we live and are brought to life by forces that we don't completely understand is a pretty remarkable and I think spiritual understanding, because it affords us a little bit of humility. Okay, Axis 3, page 3. Wow, that worked out. Time. So this would be,
Fourth dimension.
yeah, kind of the fourth dimension. Time is a huge part of what prayer is and means. Obviously, there's the very classical understanding. You're looking up to God and you're praying for something to happen in the future. You're praying to get that job promotion. You're praying for your favorite football team to win the Super Bowl. You're praying for your loved one to get healthy. You're praying for whatever. And for us as Jews, it's not just about the future. Actually, even before you ask for things for the future, you look backwards. You call upon the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah. There's a reason why on Rosh Hashanah, we have a whole section called Zichronot, remembrances or memories. There is this idea that when we are praying, we are hoping for the future, but we are also connecting with our past, with our ancestors, with those who came before us.
Shamor V'Zachor.
Sorry?
Shamor V'Zachor.
Shamor V'Zachor. Say more about that.
We are connecting the past with the future, transporting it, as it were, from the past to the future.
Yeah. Is that what you were thinking? Like guard and remember. Exactly.
We're talking about relational. Fascinating. I mean, Einstein proved that time is not absolute. It depends on the individual's perspective. So when you talk about time, forward, backward, up, down, it all depends on the perspective of one conscious, one sentient being.
Right. So if you're moving near the speed of light, time actually proceeds different. And to add on to that, to show how science and religion or faith can work together, one of Abraham Joshua Heschel's most famous sayings, and definitely his most famous book, is called The Sabbath, where he describes Shabbat as a palace in time. And so this idea of like a capsule of time when past, present, and future all folds in on itself. It's very Interstellar when you kind of go down this rabbit hole. If y'all haven't seen that movie, a wormhole, exactly. And of course, I included our prayer for peace from Kaddish, which is typically the last words we say as part of the service, which is a prayer for the future. May peace be brought to us. And then, of course, there's the inward. And I think none of these are like revolutionary, but I think for all of us, when we're struggling with prayer, I wonder if maybe there are some of these axes that we haven't been connecting with at times. And I just love this poem by Yehuda Amichai, one of the great Israeli poets. Would someone read it for us?
Where's Russell?
Sorry?
Where's Russell?
That is true. Go ahead, Wendy.
In a modern museum, in an old synagogue, in the synagogue, I, within me, my heart, within my heart, a museum within a museum, a synagogue within it. I, within me, my heart, within my heart, a museum.
Talk about time folding in on itself.
But
This-
Judaism is a religion of time, not of place.
Yeah. We are mobile. Absolutely. And I think that circles back to to pray as a Jew is to kind of be a religion of time, not a place in many ways. And yet it's not just that, because we also acknowledge the importance of place. We acknowledge the power of Jerusalem and of Israel, and the power of sacred spaces like our chapel, like our sanctuary.
But we do connect everything to time.
Right. And so similar to keva, rote, and kavanah, intention,
Mhm.
similarly, time and space are this creative tension. And you need both of them. You need sacred space. We need this place. And we understand that we are a part of a tradition that spans far beyond the longevity of bricks and mortar and stone, and so on and so forth. And so, and I love how Amichai actually plays with that idea of time and place, and the idea of there's this place within him that is its own sanctuary, and within there's the museum, and of course prayer is an opportunity to connect deeper with yourself. In Hebrew, lehitpalel, the Hebrew for pray, is a reflexive verb. It is to do something to yourself. And so, yeah, Joe, and then I'll have my closing comments.
Solve the problem for me, which I've never been able to figure out why. We have this prayer, open my mouth, and all of a sudden we start praying. We don't wait for our mouth to open. We pray, open my mouth, and then that's the keva and the kavanah. The first part, open my mouth, that's the kavanah. It's open my heart for intention. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you. It always bothered me. Open my mouth, but wait a minute, I gotta read.
And it works the other way too, because the keva can help with the kavanah. You know, I always say it's hard to, I don't know, it's hard to write a song if you don't know any notes. And so by having words and language to be able to build from, and by learning typical Jewish prayers in the same way, you know, we're doing with B'nai Mitzvah students or religious school students, it's giving you that kind of raw material so that when you do have that intention of your heart springing through, you have words that you can you can use for it. It's really hard. It's really hard.
This is easy.
And so finally, we have Psalm 51, which actually is often recited at the end of the Amidah, similar to Yehiyu Leratzon, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you. Create a pure heart for me, O God, renew a steadfast spirit within me. I think this is something we all hope for each and every time we step up to the bat to pray. So thank you all for stepping up to the bat to look through this with me. Before concluding, I want to give one quick announcement. Sincerely hope you will join Rabbi Sternberg in exactly a month.